What is that noise? Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone, to Lockdown Lunch with me, Kelly Ransom, and my fabulous guest today is someone I'm slightly familiar with. I would like to welcome to our lunch date, Leslie Reid. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for
taking
me.
time.
Yeah, it's a nice break from the grind to just hang
Yes.
out virtually. So thank you for inviting me.
I'm so happy to have you. Leslie lives in West Roslindale, which is the weird part between West Roxbury and Roslindale in Massachusetts and Boston. She's a community development and affordable housing professional. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the comments. And if they are appropriate, I will bring them into the live stream. So, Leslie.
Yes.
What day is it?
It is Friday.
Yes.
God, it's Friday. Although it doesn't have the same meaning it used to, but it's still something.
And it's a long weekend, kind of.
It is, kind of. We are honoring the Patriots Day holiday without the marathon. I hope people find, alternative things to do to feed their souls.
I'm looking forward to doing nothing.
There you go. Slugging out is definitely, something that you can perfect during this time.
I don't know if I'll perfect it, but I should. But I'll work on it. So you've been working at home for a little over a month.
Mm-hmm.
And what has that been like as someone who does not normally do that?
Yeah, wow. It's been a huge adjustment. I started off at my dining room table and then eventually set up a little workstation. So
That's good.
Here it is. You can hear in the background, one of my neighbors is taking advantage of this, I guess, to replace their front porch. So little construction activity outside.
All right.
I have to say, some of the hardest changes for me was getting used to Zoom, first of all. So for the first week, I was like, no video.
Yeah, you were anti-Zoom.
And then I realized, well, honestly, it's good to be able to see people's faces, but it's also important for me in my professional role to be visible and seen. So I kind of got used to it. I got a nice profile picture for when I have to stop my video. And then my next challenge is to fiddle around with my Zoom background. So
have you done that yet? Or?
I haven't done it yet. I mean to. I'm hoping that maybe the next time we have a staff gathering, we could have a background, best background competition and kind of have some fun and support people who might not be as comfortable with the technology, but I'm adapting to it. It was hard the first week or two, but I'm getting kind of used to it now.
So how many Zooms are you in a day, do you think?
I feel like I am on more Zooms and calls than before, and sometimes it's like wall to wall. Sometimes it starts at 8 and goes to 4 with really limited breaks. So that is sometimes challenging, So after being on Zoom all day, then I actually keep working to actually get work done.
Right.
So maintaining some reasonable work-life balance is actually in some ways harder than it is when you can kind of physically leave the office. And now that the office is here, it's always here. So, struggling with those new boundaries.
Same, definitely.
Big challenge. The first week I couldn't find printer paper. And I popped into the office and availed myself of a ream of paper. I had a little panic attack moment when I ran out of printer ink. But scrounged some up. So, getting home workspace set up and having the supplies, I think I'm pretty good for now. So.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
It's good to have a dedicated space, but I agree that the work-life balance is difficult when your office is your home.
For sure.
Do you feel like you've been working more or about the same?
Definitely more.
Yeah, me
definitely
too.
More. And again, so that balance of after you have to log off and shut it down and walk away from it. And when you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning thinking about something, it's like, no, try to go back to sleep, or, have a cup of coffee and read the newspaper before just diving back in. So yeah, it is a bit of a challenge.
I struggled with that before the lockdown, so.
Yeah. And of course, adapting to my new office mates is fun and challenging as well. So having people moving through the house, and,
Right.
And the dog running around and all these other things has been an interesting adaptation and challenge as well. The one good thing is that I cut the cord on cable probably late last year, and I beefed up our internet access. And so we haven't had any.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we have, everybody in the house Zooming and streaming and all of this other stuff. And I just feel blessed that, that's worked. I had one like panicky moment where I had to the internet stopped and I had to reset the modem, and I was like panicked. I was like, oh my God.
I was really nervous the windstorm day that we had.
What?
The day, like a few days ago, Monday, I think, when the windstorm happened, I was really nervous that my life would be taken away from me.
Yeah, me too. So, I was just like plugging away, looking out the window thinking, oh, gee, the wind is high. And then people started sending me pictures of like huge trees downed all over West Roxbury and on people's houses. And I was like, oh my goodness. I feel like I dodged something there. And just even the thought of losing power, I can't even.
I have next to me, I have a whole pile of charged batteries and tablets and stuff that we picked up from around the house that day, and like just in case. But
of course you do. I would have been screwed.
Well, you can always borrow a battery. But hopefully, yes, the internet and the power do not go down. Yeah. So I would be guffawed at if I did not bring up affordable housing when talking to you. Anyone who is in the affordable housing realm in Massachusetts and maybe even New England knows who you are and knows you're such a rock star in that field. So we have to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
But only just a smidge.
Okay.
For people who are watching who aren't in this field or, a part of the, activist community or anything like that, what is affordable housing and why is it important?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I hate the word affordable housing because it's fair enough to ask affordable to who? And there isn't a great response to that question. So just to get technical for a minute, affordable housing is really regulated housing. It means that there is some kind of public assistance or support for the housing. And in exchange for that public support, you limit the rents or sales prices you can charge, and you limit the incomes of the people who are eligible for that housing. And so that runs a really broad gamut,
Right.
So that's technically what affordable housing is. It's below market rate. And there's rules over what you can charge and, who can live there. So that's like affordable housing in a nutshell. I personally, I'm a houser. I believe fundamentally in the idea of housing first. When you just think about the inequalities and disparities that we have in our country, it's really hard to address any of them systemically if people don't have a safe, decent place to lay their heads. So how do you deal with people's medical issues, which is a big deal right now, more than ever? I can't imagine people going through this, who don't have a safe, reliable place to lay their heads. Or for kids when they're going to school normally, or even now. There's so many ways that, housing is your home, it's your foundation, it's your base. And so I believe fundamentally, and it's been my personal and professional, commitment to make sure as many people as possible have access to housing, because that's how you build on, the other, disparities when it comes to financials or medical issues or education or anything. You got to start with a home. And,
Yeah.
so, I enjoy it. Some days I feel bad because in America, with all the resources that are invested in regulated or affordable housing, we're probably only reaching 25 or 30% of the folks with need. And so sometimes that feels a little demoralizing. And on the other hand, one of my mantras is, we can do the best with what we have because it's better than nothing at all. And that's kind of what keeps me going.
It's very zen.
Yeah.
Is housing in general or affordable housing being affected by this whole situation right now?
Oh my God. Yes, in so very many ways. I mean, I start just thinking about current residents of affordable housing, and in some ways I'm glad for them because there is a really robust community around affordable housing who really mobilized quickly to implement safety standards, to keep emergency services running, but then also to, keep in touch with residents, find out what they need, and connect them with resources.
Right.
So I think paramount is kind of the safety and wellness of the residents in our housing. Everybody is a lot of people who live in our housing are people who are either losing their jobs and then have difficulty paying their rent, or some of the frontline workers, nurses and supermarket workers and delivery workers. So ensuring their safety, but also creating a safety net for people who are going to experience financial pain. So there is a moratorium on evictions for non-payment.
Yes, Sam and I
are pursuing folks for non-payment of their rent. So yeah, we are seeing that people are paying less rent this month than they did last month. For us as owners, it's going to be painful, but like I said, we have access to resources to make sure that the properties run. I'm more concerned for the residents, and I'm really excited, and maybe it will actually maybe even change the system when we come out of this, that the burden isn't on the residents, isn't on people who are working or losing their salaries, that burden gets shifted to real estate owners and banks and other lenders and public agencies to make up the difference, and not do that on the backs of people who are vulnerable to begin with and are just being, just are facing so much in the face of this on top of it. So that's a little bit of a glimmer of hope. As much as I'm worried about the negative impacts, I am glad that the approach that's been taken by the industry not to pursue residents at this point for rent aggressively is actually a good thing that's coming out of this. You might have also heard Mayor Walsh negotiated an agreement with kind of the key banks that hold people's house mortgages. It's a mixed bag. You can defer your payments for 90 days. They get tacked on the back of your loan and you pay more interest, but at least there's some room for people who need it. Although my recommendation is, if you don't need it, don't take it. If you can afford to pay your mortgage, keep paying it. But it's nice to know, again, that the city and public agencies and advocates are thinking about homeowners as well and trying to create as much space for them in these terrible times as possible as well.
Well, I certainly all your work in the affordable housing realm, but it's important. I'm glad that you're on the front line of that.
Yeah, I am, and I'm not. When you start this work, this kind of a crisis isn't something that you particularly imagine. And so I feel like I'm doing a radically different job than I've spent my career preparing for. And so, in some ways, I hope that the experience I bring helps people who are involved in our housing to weather it as best as possible. But on the other hand, I feel pretty overwhelmed by how this is going to play out. And when it comes to how it's going to affect housing down the line, I'm like, I look 30 days in the future, and beyond that, who knows what things are going to look like. Probably some bad things, but hopeful that maybe there'll be some systemic changes that come out of this. People are still renting apartments, and they're doing it all remotely. And imagine if that continued into the future. The same with paperwork that people have to file in affordable housing. It's all happening over the phone and remotely. And think of all of the time and energy that can be saved on the back end of this, not to, have people running around. So those are the little glimmers of maybe systemic improvements that might come out of this.
There are some silver linings. We'll see if they
looking for them anyway.
Manifest in the future, but I'm hopeful and I'm not hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ask me an hour from now. I'm feeling glass half full-ish this particular hour, but ask me again in 3 hours from now, and I might feel differently.
So we have a question. I'm going to bring up from Max.
Hi, Maxie.
Says, if tenants can't pay their rent due to loss of income, will they have to make up the missed rent in order to stay in their home once the eviction moratorium is lifted?
That is a really excellent question. We're waiting for some guidance from HUD, especially for federally assisted properties, and most affordable housing properties are. I personally want to believe that owners and funders of affordable housing will find resources to make up for mixed rent rather than pursuing residents on the other side of this. Just deferring payments and then chasing after people who have been on unemployment or out of jobs. That's going to be a tough situation. And I want to believe that we can bring other resources to bear that will allow us not to have to go back to people retroactively. And, I'll just put on my radical hat for a minute here. And, it's not a rent holiday. People still should meet their obligations. But at the end of the day, like I said, if low-income, working households, elders, seniors, disabled folks, if we can find a way to help them cover their rent during this time, that's great. To me, that's making sure that the resources that are coming from the government actually benefit the people who need it most.
Yes.
And I think that means, like I said, owners and lenders of affordable housing are going to have to look at what resources we can put in place permanently so that we're not in a position of having to retroactively, chase people down for rent that they couldn't pay during this time. So,
thank you,
it's a good opportunity for some
for tuning in. Love Max. I'm going to pivot a little. So you said you're working from home, obviously, and you have workers.
Yeah.
You have kids at home, and one is graduating from Harvard this year, and two are in high school.
That's right.
How the heck is that all working out? Where all this going down right now?
I have to say I grieve a little bit because, being a senior in college and seniors in high school is so much like rites of passage, the anxiety of passing your classes, thinking about college or new jobs, proms and graduations, and all of that is just poof. I'm really sad about it. I think they're at least saying they're less sad than I am. I really wanted to see Kaya graduate from Harvard, and she's like, whatever. Just keep it moving. So, it's strange times indeed. For the first week, our dining room table, one side was Madison Park Development Corporation and the other side was Harvard. And so I would listen to her lectures and she'd listen to my Zoom calls. The twins don't really like to let me see what they're doing. I know they're doing work because I'm in touch with their teachers, but they're much more doing it from their laptops, in their beds. So that's a challenge. I kind of don't like the way, especially for my high school kids, the way that this has come down. They're each getting separate emails from 5 separate teachers to try to manage 5 separate assignments. And I'm like, I just don't feel like it's fair to expect that every kid is going to just shift into that mode of communicating effectively with adults by email, every day. And, I find it a little bit irritating and really feel like at least the school they go to could do a better job. And I did have some conversations with, support folks there, a dean and a guidance counselor to say, you guys can't just leave them alone with 5 teachers emailing. Like, what are you doing to help them manage it? How do you help them prioritize what needs to be done and what they should give themselves spaces not to feel pressure about? So I worry a lot for the kids that, it's hard enough as it is, but then to be on your own trying to email 5 different, teachers is, I just think, again, is hard for them. And I'm sad that this is the way that they're kind of finishing, their school year. But it is what it is. We were expecting to go see a couple of schools, colleges that the seniors were admitted to. And so that's not going to happen. So that's a little sad. That's a bummer. So, having to make decisions about next year kind of remotely and not being able to, go visit schools or, that's tough. But, we're lucky enough that they have good options and we'll have to make the best of them during this. So, Kai, my older daughter, is kind of my office mate a little bit more, although we separated. The dining room table's hers, my desk is mine now. The twins float up and down, mostly seeking out food or a bigger screen, the TV downstairs. I feel thankful that we have a safe place that I can see them, that I know that they're healthy and safe. And at the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing, and when I think about it, I think about 9/11. I was actually pregnant with the twins in 9/11. And I'm thinking, that was an event that changed everything. And they grew up with the change and they never knew what it was before. And then there's some aspects of the 2008 financial crash that changed the world too. And, it's terrible and it changes things. And then you come out the other side. And so I guess, for them, this is going to be one of the defining events that kind of changes the world for their generation. And so while that makes me sad, I guess a lot of generations have these kind of defining events. And it's just really part of life.
We're going to keep talking. I just want one technical thing.
Okay.
Whatever you're hearing is echoing.
Okay.
Can you turn it down a little on your end?
I think I can.
Not your microphone, your
audio. I don't even know how to do that. Technical assistance, please. Let's see.
So how are you listening?
I'm listening over the speaker on my computer.
So just turn it down as low as you can. Because people are saying they can hear doubles.
Okay.
We're learning.
We are. So now you have to give me a minute because here's technical difficulties.
I think. Oh, I don't hear it anymore.
You don't?
Can you still hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Yay, look at us solving problems.
Except I didn't really do anything.
Sorry, I
didn't even
change the serious topic that we were talking about. But now we sound good and we look good too.
Okay, good.
Well, the 9/11 thing is so interesting because I'm 33, so I'm in that generation period of I had 9/11 in 9th grade. I had the recession right when I was in college, pretty much, or leaving college, and marathon wars in between that and everything.
The marathon
housing crash, marathon bombing, and now this. So I feel happy for your kids that they don't have all of those things.
Yeah, I guess they do. I can remember the marathon bombing, and in some ways we were lucky because we were out of town on vacation, so we missed that lockdown and we were kind of watching it, on the news from afar, which I imagine was really different than being physically in the city when the bombings happened and all the subsequent crazy events. But yeah, these things happen. And I guess the important question is, how do we kind of support each other? How do you take care of each other? How do you stay connected to people? How do you think about the trauma and, be aware of the trauma and then find ways to work through that together.
It's hard, but it's collective, which I think is a precedent for bigger change because everyone's going through it.
I think that's right. And here's a good example, being able to connect with you this way. I would have never thought that was a possibility if you had asked me a month ago. I would never do that. And yeah, I've connected, with, cousins and relatives and friends that I really wouldn't have had as much contact with, but for this situation. So while it's stressful that it's the situation, having those human connections is kind of, what's going to get us all through as much as possible.
I mean, I didn't think, if you told me in February I was going to have a fake TV show, I'd be like, okay, what? No.
Yeah. Or that I'd be on a fake TV show. I'd be like, no, that's not even a thing. So I guess
the big thing about now, I'm still doing my full-time job and stuff, but I'm like, oh, I really have the opportunity to just be wild and manifest the craziest things that I've ever wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I've always wanted to be a writer. So I've been writing, or at least consider myself a writer. And I love this stuff. I always wanted to be on reality TV. I always wanted to be on TV and do stuff like this. Yeah. So Pandemic Kelly is a writer / talk show host.
And I love it. You are always such an inspiration, and the crazy ideas that you take in your head, fundraising events and reviving the Latin Quarter World's Fair and whatever other adventures you are on. And so it's really inspirational. I'm really inspired by your writing, which I know you started before this, but your writing is incredible. It feeds my soul. I hope it's nurturing yours as well. And yeah, you've always said you wanted to be famous. So minutes of fame, honey.
Here I am.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I want that. It's such a weird want because it's so superficial, but I swear, since I was a little kid, tiniest memories I have, I want to be famous. I want to be famous.
Yeah. Well, you are a superstar in my book, and I'm sure with a lot of the other people who are listening and watching this and who have come across you, you're an absolute superstar.
Thank you. Enough about me. Let's talk more about you.
All right.
What are some activities you've been doing to stay busy when you are not working and not caring for the dog and the kids?
Okay, so let's see. Some kind of systemic deep cleaning. So maybe a room a week, the bathroom on your knees with bleach and a toothbrush, which is normally satisfying, but even more so now.
Yes.
And so some purging and reorganizing. And so, giving myself an hour or two, every other day to just focus on that has felt great. Which I might have done anyway, but it brings me a different level of satisfaction.
Agreed.
We talked about the dog. Me and Charlie do our walks. I think it's now become a meme where the dog is can you not? The dog is so over coronavirus, but grabbing him and, just tooling around the block, dodging people on the sidewalk has now become something that I enjoy doing. I have a back porch, which unfortunately my internet access doesn't work on the back porch. Otherwise I would.
But also maybe fortunately.
Huh?
Maybe fortunately.
Unfortunately, I'd love to do a Zoom from my back porch, but I've been really enjoying watching spring take shape. So from my back porch, I can see, my backyard and other people's backyards, and there's trees and, the crocuses are pushing up through the grass. And, I've always just kind of looked at the birds, but I've noticed there's this explosion in the number of cardinals and blue jays and, birds I've never even seen before. And it's not I'm a birder, but, watching them and watching the changes has been kind of a touch point for me that kind of brings me joy. And so I love doing that. Hanging out on the back porch, I saw now albino skunk, saw and smelled. And so I feel like, limiting our activity has created
for sure.
space for like nature to kind of adapt its presence in a way, and just it brings me peace and joy to be more present and kind of observe that. So that's something that I've been doing. I'd like to say I've been reading, but most of what I'm reading is guidelines around Corona and the newspaper. I refuse to watch TV at this point.
I kind of do too. I haven't really been.
I don't do the Trump press conferences. I don't even do the mayor and governor press conferences. I just read about them after the fact.
They send it out the second after they happen.
I'm sorry?
So, I mean, like there's an article about it, like right afterwards. And I'm in therapy. My therapist suggested it's actually better for your mental health to read versus watch.
Which I had kind of started doing with the presidential election. I was for Elizabeth Warren, and when she lost in Massachusetts, I was like, okay, peace out, I'm done. I can't even.
Right.
And so I stopped watching TV and kind of selectively read, things, because I did feel like I needed to pull back from some of that. So I was practicing that before. So this is a long way to say, I'm not reading a terrible amount, although I did order. Carolyn Crockett wrote a book about
oh really?
Yeah, about the highway, stopping the highway in Massachusetts. Hang on a second, I'm gonna run and get it right now.
I love show and tell. I am gonna ask her to grab her dog. Hopefully she will. I think he's wearing a cone right now though. So.
Oh, he is. The poor puppy has corona anxiety and he's chewing his bum.
Tia wants to see Charlie Bear.
So he does have a cone. I'll bring him out later. But here is People Before Highways.
Okay. I didn't know Carolyn Crockett wrote that.
She did. So she worked for the city of Boston in the economic development department, and now she's a professor at MIT. And so, I grew up and have done community development in Jamaica Plain and Roxbury my entire career. So this is a really interesting history of how, the fight against the highway and the redevelopment of the Southwest Corridor really affected the community. So I have this hoping.
You must know some people in that book too. You gotta.
I'm sorry?
There must be people mentioned in that book that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And its first sources, right? So it's really like the documents from the BRA and agendas from meetings and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's my plug for what I aspire to read in the short term. Been binging a fair amount of TV. Ozark. First season was great. Second season sucked. The third season was incredible.
I tried to watch one episode, and I've been talking about it all this week. My symptom of this thing, whatever this is I haven't been able to watch anything.
Oh, that's interesting. So I normally can't watch anything. Like you turn on the TV and I fall asleep in 15 minutes.
That's me right now.
But now I'm the opposite, where I actually watch things. So liked watching Ozark. There's a cute series called High Fidelity. So I don't know if people know the book by Nick Hornby.
I know the movie and the book.
Right? There was a movie with John Cusack.
And they remade it.
They did like an updated Brooklyn hipster kind of setting for it. And it's, what's Lisa Bonet's daughter's name? Zoe Kravitz.
She's so pretty. Oh my God.
Isn't she? And so she's the record store owner, and it kind of revolves around her life. And she's kind of this flawed, annoying character, but so you go through her trials and tribulations. And so I binged that. Fabulous soundtrack. The music was just incredible.
The movie had a great soundtrack too. Okay.
Yeah.
Add that to my list when I come out of my shell.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed watching that. I've been trying to watch Little Fires Everywhere. It's the thing with Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington.
Yeah.
These like kind of archetypal, Reese Witherspoon is this kind of like white mother of four, affluent white woman. And then Kerry Washington is this like single Black mom who comes into the town. And it's about kind of like, their families. It's a little overwrought and not the best character development, but it's a damn good distraction, honestly. So
that's on my list.
I've been watching that, early on, we did Outbreak, and what was the other movie?
I did watch all of that.
Yeah, we did that early on. I made the kids sit on the couch and watch it.
I rewatched all my pandemic horror movies, right when this first started happening.
Yeah, so we did that early on. We're over that. We don't do that anymore. One of the things that we binge just on the regular is Star Trek Next Generation.
What?
So,
you're a Trekkie?
Yes. My mom was an original Trekkie, so I grew up watching Star Trek as a kid, but it was more like
breaking news.
But Next Generation is totally I remember, watching it every week, and so it's fun to watch it with my kids.
So are you also into Star Wars?
Not so much, I like the older Star Wars, but the first two new ones were kind of good, and then my attention span waned, and so not huge. We're big Indiana Jones fans, so we do a marathon of that, once or twice a year. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, that's another series. Harry Potter, those series of movies are something that we get to, we watch together as a family on the regular, at least once a year. So, so some of that. So yeah, finding different ways to kind of keep busy. The grocery store has now become a federal project or adventure. Initially we were kind of just popping out to get things because we got a taste for something, and, that's changed radically. So I have this whole supermarket plan where it's the Star Market on Spring Street. They close at 8. If you go in at 7, I go in at 7:30. Half an hour
following the rules there?
And there's nobody in there, and you can spin through, and their protocols are great. They count how many people are in the store. The police sit outside. They have the plexiglass. Everybody has gloves and masks. And
they sound like they're doing better than where I go.
So that's my one tidbit I share with people is if you go right before closing, there's less people in the store. And so if you know what you want, you can kind of bang in and bang back out. So but we've been doing that, a little bit less, honestly. At first it seemed like, oh, it's a little entertaining outing. And then, the stuff started to get more serious. So, we're taking that a lot more seriously, making sure we have gloves and masks and all that stuff. Although, I worry for my kids because they're going out with bandanas over their faces,
That's what Christopher's been doing.
Driving around in cars. It's kind of,
oh shit. I didn't even think of that.
You're right.
That's...
So, my daughter's boyfriend is here, sometimes, and he's a big black kid, and I can't imagine what it's like for him to go out with a bandana, driving his car with a bandana over his face, or going into a store or something. I haven't heard any stories, but it certainly does worry me. When I heard about the curfew, I really worried that it would negatively impact, people of color and lower income people who live in the city, and there's you don't have a backyard and all of this stuff.
Right.
I've worried about that. I haven't really had any direct personal negative experience, but I do worry how this affects some parts of our population differently.
I agree with you. And something that I'm hoping it can be mass produced so that everyone can have one, but they make these masks that are, people don't think about the deaf and hard of hearing community during this. But when you're wearing a mask, you can't read lips. So they have masks that I've seen that I can't get my hands on, but I hope everyone can get their hands on, where the panel is clear.
It's clear.
And you can read lips. And I just think that has a variety, of good uses.
Yeah. At first I didn't really expect all this mask stuff, but it sounds like it's really going to become part of our lives now.
Yeah, I mean, it is in Asia.
Yeah. And I guess it's going to be for us as well. I was having this debate with my mom about masks because I got her some disposable ones, and she went, this is the cutest thing. She took the pad out of a bra. You know how you have the lining inside of a bra?
Oh.
And she put the elastic around it, and it just covers her face perfectly, and it's washable.
That's very smart.
So she can wash it and use it. And so I was really proud of her for coming up with that. And I thought that was really creative.
That's very creative. We've been doing the bandana coffee filter.
The bandana.
And then we have our super serious, like Bane-looking masks for when we go to the supermarket that we got way before this because I'm a doomsday prepper.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that the mask thing is gonna be here to stay, and I actually know I had to go to the supermarket yesterday, and for anyone who knows me personally and has personal interactions with me knows that I have something called resting bitch face, and I'm aware of it, and I'm proud of it, and that's just my face. But with the mask, you can't fix it anymore because, you know, you look at someone and you can't just smile and fix it.
Right.
So I'm noticing, I feel like everyone at the supermarket thinks that I'm glaring at them. And I'm just sensing that vibe from everyone. And so I was like really being conscious. I'm like, while I'm shopping, I'm like, how do I let the like cash register person know that I'm smiling at them? So now I'm walking around the supermarket and I'm like,
yeah, I know. What if you just say, I'm smiling at you? You just
trying to like make my eyes smile. And I was just like, I need to get the hell out of here.
I'm smiling less and less, honestly. Like the worst thing right now is when you're in the supermarket and somebody's in the middle of the aisle and you need something down there and you're just waiting and they're standing in the middle of the aisle.
All the rules.
Stand there. So I am throwing a lot of more stink eye than I used to. But it is interesting to think about how do you like deal with social cues with each other when our faces are covered, right?
That's like having a face. So
yeah.
You're gonna take away half of my face. I don't know. I want the see-through ones for everyone.
Yeah, it'd be good. We're gonna have to figure out how to adapt because honestly, you know, with the social distancing, you know, I'm further away from people. And, you know, normally when you go to the supermarket, you might have some eye contact or exchange a few words with somebody. And that's like so not the point now, you know? So it's that loss of even informal kind of superficial, you know, social interaction, you know, where like other people in the grocery store are like something to be feared, you know?
It's you can just, the tension, you can just feel it. It's stressful, scary, tense vibe.
For sure.
And I don't know if that's going to change. I do have to. So for those of you who follow me on Instagram, every day I put in my story the opportunity to ask the guest is on that day a question. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's the same as my Facebook, Kelly F. Ransom. So I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
One is anonymous and one is from Sam. So, so our first question from Samantha Montano, our wonderful guest yesterday, she would like to know, what is heteronormativity?
Well, thank you so much for the question, Sam, and for the important education I got working with Sam on diversity issues when we worked together. And I appreciate the question and I'm learning all about it. So heteronormativity is, you know, when people just assume everybody is straight or cisgendered, or, you know, you have a partner who's the opposite sex, you know, your gender is your appearance. It's all of these just assumptions that are pervasive all day, every day. You know, with race, you can kind of see it and, you know, there's certain assumptions, but kind of with, you know, gender and sexuality, you know, it's much more subtle. And I think the triggering and the lack of awareness is in some ways more there's less awareness about it. So, you know, when we started talking about diversity, a lot of it is framed around race, but then, you know, stepping into concepts of intersectionality and starting to understand sexuality and gender is something really important. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
For heteronormativity. And I'm so glad to have learned the concept with you and appreciate you so much as kind of a friend and a resource. So thank you. For the
resource. Our next question is from Anonymous.
Okay.
Maybe I'll tell you someday who it is.
All right.
What are reparations?
Oh gosh. Well, reparations.
The clip notes.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, reparations are the concept that African Americans, especially those who have descended from slaves, are entitled to some economic repayment from the government and the country. It was their stolen labor and children and lives that kind of built the economic, never mind physical foundations of this country. And so reparations is the concept, is that you attempt to quantify the financial value of that and find ways to compensate people who descended from the slaves that founded this country. And so, there's various legislation and broader policy conversations, but I have a little thing where just in my day-to-day life, I look for things that are kind of like mini reparations or like represent somehow the concept. So when we were talking about rents, it's broader than just African Americans, but if tenants don't have to pay their full rent because they don't have their income, or even if they do, and we find a different way to cover rent during this time, it's almost like mini reparations, right? It's like a direct mini reparations. It's kind of like a direct financial benefit. And so there's the big concept, but for folks who know me, it's kind of like one of my things, when we think about, disparities and, like small businesses and minority businesses. And I'm like, yes, they should get a leg up and get a better opportunity because reparations, because we're not I don't know where it will go at the federal level. It was interesting that people were actually discussing it in the presidential election.
Charlie!
Who knows where it'll go from there, but just awareness of the little things we can do when it comes to day-to-day equity that just kind of honor acknowledging the origin of the disparities that exist in our country today.
Yes, great answer. And I love when you talk about reparations.
Yeah, because reparations.
So I ask everyone who's on because I think it's really important. It helps me learn and it helps people watching now or later learn. What are some things you've been doing?
All right, you told me this is going to happen. I'm going to predict that you're asking me about my mental health. And I'm just going to jump ahead in. So what have I been doing for my mental health? Probably less than I should be. Before this, I was kind of more mindful of routines, of taking walks. Walks are my form of meditation. Some of you who might know me know that I like to knit, but I'm kind of high strung if you haven't noticed. So I actually prefer not to knit patterns. I just pick yarn I love and knit it straight out just because the act of knitting is kind of like physical meditation. So that's, those are things that I was doing kind of more routinely. And I'm probably not doing as much as I should and should be doing more. I just categorically cannot deal at this point yet with online therapy. I just can't even.
It's weird.
It's weird. And, I can only take so much. And so I'm giving myself some space, which is to say I'm not ready to do Zoom therapy and just not there. So I have to say, I'll be honest that I need to find ways as this continues and escalates and then, shifts to be more deliberate about what I'm doing for my mental health, because some of my normal self-care has slipped off. And so even talking to you about this out loud reminds me that I need to make time for that. So
very much same.
Yeah.
Are there any resources off the top of your head that people watching now or later may find useful during this lockdown situation?
I have to be honest. I feel like I'm drinking water from a fire hose on resources.
Same. Girl,
and I read them and you follow the link and you try to understand them. And so I've read a few articles, but I have to say the best resources I've gotten are from talking to people one-on-one about what they're doing. So, other people with elderly parents who are isolated, how are they staying in touch with them rather than reading an article? So I have to say, I feel really overwhelmed by the resources. I feel a responsibility at the professional level to have a basic understanding of what the resources are. But beyond that, I just feel overwhelmed. And honestly, I kind of shut down.
I get it.
Yeah, it's really overwhelming. And I get frustrated because sometimes it's like a resource and it's like, call this number, and then you get voicemail,
Or it's a fund and it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do have a wonderful collection of resources that we've been putting together as an organization at Madison Park Development Corporation. So if you'd like to check those out, you can go to madison-park.org. And there's a whole page of, oh my God, there must be over 100 now resources on there.
Right. And I want to give a shout out to Kelly and the other excellent Madison Park staff. They all work in distinct program areas. And so they've been kind of monitoring and collecting, there's Madison Park does some arts and culture work. So, Kelly's been working with the Hibernian Hall artistic staff to kind of collect resources that support creatives during this time. We have a youth development team who have been collecting great resources targeted to youth, and encouraging them. There's a lot of great online resources and trying to encourage kids to engage, online with, personal or artistic development. Food resources are certainly huge. And so understanding that, and it's not just sharing the resources. Madison Park actually had the city provide volunteers to continue food distribution when staff became unavailable to do that. So it's not just sharing the resources, it's finding the ways to use them to support both our residents and our staff. So yes, please do check out Madison Park's resources. They're really robust, and I'm really proud of the work the staff has done to make that available.
I love my coworkers. Yeah. So it has come to be the time for the final word. So if you're new to tuning in or whatever, this is week 3 or something. I don't know, but I give the floor to whoever is on that whatever day to have the final word of the show. So they can be inspiring, tell jokes, shout people out, say happy birthday, sing, dance. I don't care what they do. I put on a new pair of sunglasses and I shut up and I let them talk. And I just want to shout out before I put these sunglasses on today, Rick Berlin. These are Rick Berlin sunglasses. So thank you, sir, for these. So Leslie, the floor.
All right. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get my co-star for the closing word.
Charlie Bear! For those of you watching at home who are just tuning in, Leslie has a dog named Charlie, and people have wanted to see him, so she's going to grab him right now. He's very cute. He's in a cone. Oh, he's so snuggly. Everyone say hi to Charlie.
Hey, Charlie, look. Say hi, Charlie. Hi. So I just wanted to have Charlie Bear make his appearance. He is wearing his cone because like I said, he has COVID anxiety and has developed some weird butt gnawing habits. But we're glad to have him here with us, hanging out. Gosh, I guess my thoughts aren't really collected. I don't really have jokes, although I have started collecting COVID memes and exchanging them with friends. They're kind of inappropriate and I wouldn't do it publicly, but it's fun to get a little silly on that. Something personal I want to share is a very, very dear friend of mine actually bought her first home yesterday in the midst of all of this. And I couldn't be more proud or happy if I had bought that house myself. And so I was really inspired because that was a long journey for her. I remember 5 years ago where she refused to look at her credit score. And so really had a really long, journey through this. And so I was really proud and inspired and excited by that. For the most part, at the end of the day, I'm thankful. I'm grateful to be here with my family. My mom is somewhere safe. Most of my friends and loved ones are well. I had one friend who tested positive, but weathered it fine at home with his family. So, on the whole, I'm thankful. I'm humbled. I started this in a new leadership position at work, and it's really kind of humbled me and knocked me back a peg. And what it takes to lead through this kind of change. And it shows me that I have a lot of growth and development to do, and that with connections and support from folks like Kelly and friends and, the broader community, I just think I have a better chance to listen and take support and think about growth. So that, and then I also just want to give a shout out to Kelly for sharing this app. It's called CoStar, and it has like really in-depth astrological charts. When I was a kid, my mom used to do astrological charts, and it was a long time ago, and she had this huge leather book, and she would open it up and draw people's charts. And so I have these really fond
I have to take off my sunglasses and participate in this. I'm sorry. Yeah, I love CoStar.
Yeah, CoStar. So I really fond memories of that. So Kelly shared this app that gives you really in-depth, and interesting look at your chart. And so I'm Libra, Pisces, Libra. It's really eerie how accurate it is. There's like daily advice, and like it's totally me. And you can friend people and see how compatible you are. So thank you for that resource. It's been fun and interesting.
I love it. And you can add your friends and see how compatible you are with them. So I'm Libra, Scorpio, Cancer, Moon, and Leslie and I added each other, and we're a pretty good match.
Yeah. Although you're going to have to give me a little TA, because I didn't see exactly how to compare it. But it has been a nice way to do some introspection about, your personality and your dynamics. And then it's fun when you can connect with other people. So I really enjoy astrology. And so that's been something nice during this time that I really enjoyed. So thank you, Kelly, for sharing that.
Thank you for loving it as much as I do. So I have someone to talk about it. And so I want to thank you so much. I know you're super busy. I thank you for doing this silly little thing with me today, and being here and answering questions. And I want to thank everyone who is watching right now, is watching later, liking, commenting, sharing. I feel like such a nerd every time I say that, but it really is meaningful to me. So today's Friday, which means I am on a break. I take Saturday and Sunday off from the broadcast. When I started doing this, it was really important to me for these broadcasts to share experiences and stories that were very diverse in age, in sexual identity, in race, in gender identity, in just very diverse. So part of celebrating that diversity and showcasing it, I decided to dedicate next week to people who are not in Massachusetts and are out of state. Right. So we will be showcasing diversity of states next week. We have Melissa Gallagher from California, Carrie Dunphy from New York in New York City, my cousin Amy Goldstein in Leadville, Colorado, Brett Will Taylor, who represents Texas and Louisiana, New Orleans, and my friend Tiffany Earle in Florida. So next week should be super interesting because I have no idea what's going on in any of those states. And if you do, cool. But if you don't, tune in. Thank you again, Leslie, so much.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
I love all of you watching. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. And if you get Monday off, I hope you have a fantastic 420. Please be safe, be healthy, stay home, wash your hands, and download the CoStar app. I wasn't paid to say that, but do that. Love you.
Thanks. Be well.